everybody, welcome back to the SuperCaZt. I'm your host, the man who put the super in SuperCaZt, the Super Foch. And as always, I'm with my good buddy SteveZ, the man who put the Z in SuperCaZt. SteveZ, how you doing, buddy?
Doing great, and I'm so excited because this is a couple of films that I've been wanting for you to watch for at least 2 years, and kind of disappointed that they didn't click with you, but I still want to talk to you about them. So I want to hear what you thought about Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2.
Yeah, these are films that I didn't intentionally stay away from. I've just never really had an interest in them per se. I admire Sam Raimi. I think what he did with the Spider-Man movies before the Marvel Cinematic Universe was really good. So I have no problem with him, but I don't know, man. These movies never spoke to me. But I did want to challenge myself. That's what we do here on the show sometimes, is kind of get out of our little comfort zone a little bit and challenge each other and then talk about it. And that's what we're doing. If you're new to the program, by the way, thank you so much for joining us. And so we're going to start with Dead, which you said you had an interesting story related to this film. So let's start there, man. What's your history with this film?
Yeah, so I always mention it. Video Express. This is where a lot of these movies kind of found themselves to me. Yep. When I was going through my horror phase, I saw this movie, and it just kind of was like, oh, this looks very interesting. I started looking at the back, and I was read it and said, Stephen King says this is the scariest movie that he's ever seen. And I'm like, whoa, that's cool. And then I looked at the rating on it. It said not rated. And I'm like, okay, so I can watch this. This is not rated R, so it's fine. Yeah. I'm probably in 6th or 7th grade at the time. And I got it home, and I watched it in the dark, like you have to with a horror film like this. And I was pretty freaked out by this movie. Me and some friends in 7th grade that watched a lot of horror movies, we all kind of connected on this. We're like, that movie's scary. The first time I ever watched it, actually, my mom asked me to go check the mail, and it was night out. I go out there, it's all foggy, and this is freaking me out. So that's what I think about every time I watch this movie. I was like, the first time I ever watched this was on a foggy night, and it freaked me out. However, this is the kind of funny part about this. I watched it a few years later, and I'm like, this is not that scary. At least it wasn't as scary as it was those first few times I watched it. And then watching it for the first time in about 20 years the other night, there's definitely things I admire about this film, but it is definitely not the terrifying experience I had as a kid, which is kind of a letdown, but in a way I actually enjoy it more just because this film fascinates me. Just it's an enigma wrapped in a mystery, in my opinion.
I like that, because that's the thing that I kind of wrestled with watching this film. Is it supposed to be scary? Is it supposed to freak people out, or is it a comedy wrapped in a scary movie? I wasn't really sure, because it's just so darn cheesy, man. Like this, and we're talking about the first one, by the way. Definitely not, the greatest of effects. You're not gonna see a polished picture, as it were, on this. So if you know that going in, that probably will help you. But for me, it just and honestly, I actually had to rewind. Listen to me, rewind, go back, because I would forget what was going on. I would just be confused and everything.
8 of spades. 2 spades, jack of diamonds, jack of clubs.
Why have you disturbed our sleep? Awakened us from our ancient slumber. You will die! Like the others before you. One by one we will take you.
So let's start there. As far as the story goes, and by the way, this spoiler alert, this film's been out, 40 years, something like that?
Yeah.
So, gonna spoil the heck out. Give us a little the Cliff Notes version of what this first movie is supposed to be about.
Yeah, so the first one, and I guess we should say kind of the context of it. This is basically a glorified student film. This is Sam Raimi getting some of his buddies together and going out and shooting a movie. And that's one thing that really appealed to me this time watching it, is just how it does have that very cheap feel to it. But that could throw you off dramatically. Like you said, the effects aren't the best. The sound's not even recorded the best at times. There's some really bad ADR in there. But to me, I think it's really cool because this film is very imaginative. It really captures a lot, but the story is very basic. I mean, it's basically your classic 1950s sort of thing at first. Bunch of kids going out, hanging out in the woods at a cabin. Yeah, who knows how they found this cabin, but they're going there. And they stumble upon something. Here's a tip, guys. If you ever find a book that is carved in human flesh and it's got a face on it, just don't mess with that book. Just stay away from that. So they find the book, they play the recordings, they wake up the dead, and pretty much everybody in the house gets killed one by one until finally we have Raimi's best friend in the world, Bruce Campbell. It's our last guy. And he gets basically tortured the rest of the film. So that's kind of the setup. Like you said, I can see how this does not work for everybody because it is so cheesy. It is so corny. But I think you got to realize that a lot of that's intentional, that they realize, hey, we are not going to make the best looking movie. We don't have the best actors. This is just our friends. We want to make a movie for dirt cheap and just release it and see what happens. So the acting is, whether it's intentional or not, is not the best. The line delivery, the writing is not the best. But as far as execution, the filmmaking techniques behind it, you got to applaud it for that at least.
Exactly. I was going to say that the fact that they set it up like a student film, and if you look at it like that, like, you know, you and me got a camera and shot, you know, out there, I applaud that because it does make it more real. There's no, you know, just Hollywood type shots. I mean, it's all just kind of herky-jerky stuff, and you can't really tell what's going on in some scenes, and you know, the pacing in this film, and I admired the pacing. It was good for me. Didn't drag on a lot of things. So yeah, the production standpoint of this film, I think, is definitely to be applauded for sure. Everything from the music. Now the writing, that's where I said, you know, because some of the lines just made me laugh, and I was. You know, I felt like that was kind of intentional. I felt like that was kind of the point to kind of ease people, you know, to have these corny jokes. Because, you know, you see that all the time in horror movies thereafter, like Scream or whatever. But that's, for me, the writing was probably the worst part of this film. It just, I don't know, it was just so cheesy. But it is a good time. But as I told you over the phone, it just didn't grab me. It's just like, okay, that's cool. You know, it wasn't the movie that's going to turn me into Evil Dead fan. Now, the second one, and we'll get into it in a minute, improved upon a lot of things, writing included. With this one, man, talk about some of the performances, because you said a lot of these guys were, of course, Sam Raimi's good friends. You talked about Bruce Campbell, and I can't talk about him a lot because somebody I live with does not like him. So I.
Oh man, that hurts me. Bruce Campbell is is a national treasure in my opinion. He and in
Hey,
this
he
one
named Spider-Man.
he is so hammy. He hams it up so well in this one.
Yes.
And he's definitely not as polished as he's in the second one. I think basically if you studied this film series, he plays the same character, but it's 3 different characters, if you will. This one he's not confident. In this one, he's just the house's punching bag, basically. Like he's got to be beat up, he's got to get scared, he's got to do some terrible things. At the same time, I love him at the beginning when he's acting like I just laughed so many times the first 5 minutes of this film whenever they're just driving across the bridge, and then he just for some reason opens the door and looks out. He's like, oh, I guess we're stuck here on this bridge. And he's like you said, the writing's terrible, but I think if you didn't have him delivering it like he's some 1950s I don't know, I've seen movies like this that they're trying to do send-offs on, and I get it. And at the same time, I if you don't get it, I understand why. I understand that this does not work for everybody, especially when it gets really, really gross. That's the thing about this film, because it plays into the comedy big time, and in fact it'll shift from a comedic scene to kind of scary at the same time. That's what I noticed this time, is I couldn't make up my mind while I was watching it this time. It definitely has moments that kind of freak you out, especially as Cheryl, I remember as she's changing into the first zombie type thing, and then she just gets worse and worse looking as the film goes on. She gets nastier and nastier every time you see her. So the effects, the makeup, I really applaud it, just because, it's not the best looking, but they using the lighting and just the really the sound effects and what they do with the vocals, and that, I think that's really good. The whole "we'll swallow your soul" stuff that they kind of meme in the other ones, but in this one I think it actually is kind of terrifying.
I want to ask you about blood and guts and gore in horror movies, because there's obviously a lot of opinions out there, and everybody's valid. Everybody has their own opinion, and of course there's whole movie franchises with blood and guts and gore. Final Destination and Saw and on and on. Where do you fall in that category, man? I'm pretty sure I know, but and I know it doesn't bother you. I know it's probably not a big deal to see it, but because to me, I'm sort of on the fence about it. It doesn't necessarily bother me as long as it's part of the story, but if it's just for the spectacle, and you see that in movies, you see that it's just a spectacle thing, just to shock people or whatever, and that I can't really get behind. But what do you say, man, on that front?
Well, I'm going to talk mainly about this film, how they use it. I think it's totally comedic. It's all about the vibe. There's some parts that are just kind of gross if you think people's getting their arms cut off, their hands cut off, their heads cut off. But the gratuitous nature of it, just how it just blood splatters everywhere. At one point, it's just coming out of the ceiling. It's everywhere. That's got to be comedic, in my opinion. I think that's what it is. Yes, there's time where violence is used to show the realness of something. Sometimes it's there to gross you out. Sometimes it's there just because, like you said, there's a spectacle. They want to play that up. But in this film in particular, I think it's just all comedic. I think it's these are a bunch of people that wanted to have some fun with a movie, and I really get that when I watch this movie. This movie was a lot of fun to make.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that they push any envelopes with this. I don't think they just do stuff just for the wow factor or anything like that. But I also think that they do a lot of things for the comedic effect. Now, if it grosses you out and you don't see the comedic, I understand that. but I'm going to defend this film in that respect. I'm going to say that I agree with you as far as what they were trying to do, because I don't think they were doing anything other than, being facetious, being kind of funny, being kind of, silly. And if you look at it like that, I think it works best in that way.
Except for there's two parts that kind of are pretty rough to me. The part with the pencil through the Achilles, I grimace every time I see that. That one and I think it has something to do with like poking out eyes at the end. That's kind of rough. But at the same time, it's like, what else was he supposed to do in that situation? He's kind of screwed. But yeah, this one, it's definitely goes all the way, and it's better than it should be, in my opinion. But at the same time, the second one, oh my gosh, it takes it to a different level. I think we should go ahead and start unpacking that one.
That sounds good. So we get this one done, and it came out. What year did the first one come out?
I think it's 81, and then the second one's like 87. So about 6-7 years in between production.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I notice. And you can say, if you watch a lot of films where they're in a series and they take several years from each other, like what was it? Well, for instance, Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters 1 is vastly different, in my opinion, than Ghostbusters 2. And with this film, I do feel like a lot. Obviously, the budget was probably a lot higher. And the production value was a lot higher. I mean, you can definitely tell that they had a little bit more money in the bank for that kind of thing. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the second one. I said I enjoyed it better than the first one, but I don't know. I'm maybe leaning back towards the first one, man, just because while they did everything better in the second one, I think I like the story better in the first one. What say you, pal?
I could see what you're saying. The first one is definitely more climactic. It builds up to something, while this one it deviates a bunch, and that's it's all over the place, and that's why I like it, actually.
Okay.
Because they could have made this basically a remake, and that's what some people actually misinterpret it as, is like basically a remake with more money, more production value, building sets in a gym is where they end up building this like whole wood set. You definitely see that added stuff, but to me, it's a completely different film. It's trying to accomplish something different. In fact, the way I look at it is this is sort of like the same story, but in a different dimension almost. It's because this one gets a lot more psychological, in my opinion. But it also leans into that humor that I really liked in the first one to 11. This movie is hilarious, in my opinion, and it's so good about what it does with that. At the same time, I think they add a lot to the lore. I think they add a lot to the story. Bruce Campbell gets to do a lot more, and the side characters actually enhance it a lot more. And I think that added dynamic of adding more people coming to the cabin and stumbling upon this, like, what the heck is happening? I think that makes it a different sort of film. So that's why I'm like, it's not a sequel. It's not really a remake. It's just kind of its own thing with sort of the same characters.
Yeah, you had mentioned the other day over the phone before I even saw the second one that it was sort of that a lot of people say it was kind of a remake of the first one. And I was just like, I mean, not really. I mean, some of the same actors and everything like that. But I could definitely decipher between the two films. Now the plot, they're similar, I guess. And I guess that's what they're trying to say. They're similar, but I don't think exactly the same. So I don't necessarily buy that this is just a fancier remake. I think it improves on a lot of things, and but I'm not so sure it's like the same exact film.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, to me, that makes people probably think that is the first 10 minutes or so is kind of a rehash of the first one. It's just they change it. I mean, they're like, let's do it with less characters. Let's just have him a girlfriend when he comes out here. And the same thing with like he stumbles upon the tape recorder. They just They just show us all that we saw in the first one. But to me, whenever the first one kind of ends with that whatever that shape is chasing him, and then it picks up in the second one where it like flies it through the air, he gets sent through the thing, and from there the movie just gets crazier and crazier and crazier.
Got that right.
And to me, that's why I love this film. And I really need to analyze myself. I need to figure out, so why do I like weird stuff like this? I don't know, but this one, the experimentation, the things they do in this film that you do not see in any other movie, the scenes that are in this film that you do not see in any other film, that's why I like this film. That's why it just kind of speaks to me and makes it way, way different. It is totally unique.
I completely agree with that. And I think that's what you want in a film, or at least I do, as far as that's concerned, because you don't need to make a film 6 years later and it be the exact same thing. You don't need to do that, in my opinion. I think that's just, wasting time. I mean, Disney's made all these remakes, and we could go on and on about that. And it's just like, to an extent, you got to be like, where's the original stuff, And yes, there's borrowed stuff from the original, and, it's called Evil Dead 2. I think there's 2. So they're in the same quote-unquote universe, as we all like to talk about now. But I really feel like these movies differ more than I think people realize. And I think that, and not to be condescending of what I said about the plot and everything, but I think that the craziness that we see in the second one is, I think it's entertaining anyways.
Yeah, it's very entertaining. Like, to me, just the camera work in this. I mean, Sam Raimi, he's picking up his game, and I can definitely see why in the future somebody had the right idea. Let's let this guy direct the comic book movie, because this one, I think he gets that comic book framing really down to a pat. That's one thing I didn't mention about the first one. If you ever watch it, make sure you watch it in the right aspect ratio. You have to watch it in the old school sort of square image. Otherwise, it looks kind of stupid. It doesn't really work at all. But this one, the camera work's amazing. The editing's insane. Bruce Campbell, like I said, he is a completely different person in this film. He's more confident, but at the same time, he's a bigger clown. And he's more unhinged. And they push him into like unique circumstances. Like this one part, it starts when he's like, okay, one thing I have to point out that shows you that this whole thing might be a dream or possibly like some weird purgatory they're in or something. Just wakes up back at the house after he was out by the bridge or something at one point, he just wakes up, he's there, and I'm like, how did that happen? And then from there he wakes up again from another dream, and this is the beginning of like this crazy part of this film that I just love, and I just like, I want to circle that and just say this is the film to me, because we're just following this one character, but he's losing his mind. He's this house is freaking him out. And then all of a sudden his hand's possessed and it's smashing plates across his face. At one point the hand starts like crawling across the ground by himself to get to a way to kill him. It's just insane. Who thinks of this stuff?
Who's laughing now?
and it culminates in the wall just spraying blood all over him, and then everything in the house starts laughing at him. This is where I'm just like, this movie is crazy, and I just love it for this. This is my favorite part, where everything's just laughing at him, and he has nothing to do but just turn into a cartoon character and start laughing back.
Yeah, I agree with you.
What did you think about that scene?
I thought it was complete nuts, man. I really did. When I texted you last night, I was just like, I was not expecting this. I mean, even after watching everything else prior, it just blew my mind. And it's hard to describe. Like, I was trying to describe it to somebody earlier, and I was just like, you just gotta go watch the film. It's pretty nuts. And, but that brings up a question. There's movies, not just this one, but several other movies where something will happen. And it's ambiguous as far as, is it real? Is it a dream? They talk about that Joker movie being all in his head. I mean, when you hear stuff like that, do you feel like... Because here's my thing with it, man. I hate stuff like that. Because it's like, you know what? It's a film. It's a movie. Why does everything have to be so explained? You know what I mean? And it just drives me insane how people get stuck on stuff like that. And honestly, I take everything as face value if I see it. Whatever it is, unless they explain it specifically or say, no, it's this or whatever, I'm going to be like, it's part of the film. And that's good enough for me. What about you, man? Are you... Where do you sit on that?
Once again, I'm mainly going to talk about this film because that's kind of what we're here for.
Sure.
It's
right, exactly.
Yeah, I like the ambiguity of this one because I don't think it is a dream. I think it's the house just messing with him. It's making him lose his mind. Maybe he thought he was running way over there, like miles and miles away, or driving in his car and all that stuff. Who knows? He could have just been there the whole time. Yeah. It's crazy. This is supernatural stuff, and it works. But it also plays into the whole sort of dream logic of this film. Anything and everything could happen.
Right.
And I think that works. But your thing that you're talking about, I think it is sort of lazy writing at times, especially if it's not, the seeds are not there. Yeah. I mean, the best films, the best writing has the seeds planted to where you could figure it out. And if you can't, if it just seems like a sort of weird thing, like out of nowhere, it's not good writing.
Yeah.
But this one, going back to the writing of this one, it has moments of it that just, they say stuff that's just insane. Like, I don't know if you remember the scene where there's like this weird sort of camera movement. It's like chasing around, it's making all this weird sound effects. And then all of a sudden it just stops and the characters are just saying, what was that? Because they're saying the same thing we would be saying. They're like, what was that? And then Ash randomly out of nowhere just says, I think it was something trying to break through for another dimension into our world. And you're like, okay, I guess that explanation works. I mean, I guess that's what that was.
I mean, you say what you want. If you don't like this film, you got to say they lean into the absurdity pretty early on. And I mean, with it being like that, I was like, okay, this is crazy, but I'm gonna see how this works out. And you got to give them credit. I mean, it was one of those films, and it's one of those films I feel like a lot of people would either love it, like you and I do, or hate it, like some other people might do. I don't think this is a film, especially the second one, that you're kind of on the fence about. I think you kind of do one or the other, and I think it's intentionally made that way, honestly.
I think so, because it's definitely a B movie. I mean, if you want to get out of its hole, none of these characters have any depth. I think this one tries to add a lot more to it because it has like sort of more complicated plot with the whole her father finding out the that this is something from the medieval times, and it has Ash in the
Right.
in the book at one point, more
Right.
with the story and stuff. But at the same time, these characters have no depth. Like the boyfriend that just comes picks her up at the airport, he's just Joe Handsome, I guess is his character's name. I don't know his name. And then you have Bobby Joe and
Right.
the guy in the overalls. They're just there because, yeah, I mean, typically in these movies you see some rednecks that just are there to be there.
Right.
And I don't know. I really like that aspect of this one because these different characters, these sort of cardboard cutouts, these cartoon characters they threw out in this film, it adds a new dynamic and it adds a lot more comedic stuff that I think we were missing in the first one, because that one they're just being cheesy actors, but in this one it's more like they're playing into their sort of character more.
Yeah, I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like the first one was more like, a little bit anyway, more like, let's say, a Young Frankenstein type movie or something like that. Whereas this one is, the second one is just, and again, I don't understand why people say it's the same movie, because they're just totally different. And with the same characters and stuff, but there's just so many different things that the second one does that, from a visual standpoint, like I said, I like. But as far as the story standpoint, other than the craziness, I'm just like, it's all right.
Yeah, and that's understandable. I mean, these films are not for story. They are
No.
for
No.
people like me that just like weird experiences and just like to go see stuff that they don't see in other movies, something new. That's why I like this film. And I definitely hear the critiques you're saying. In fact, I watched a Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel thing earlier, and Siskel was just like you. He's like, I acknowledge the filmmaking, but to me it just feels like a bunch of scenes that have no real connection, because it is a train of thought movie where it's just kind of like going left, it's going right, it's going under, it's going up, it's everywhere. And I can see it's not for everybody, but Ebert was more like me. He's just like, no, this movie's crazy, and it makes a lot of homage to like other things. Like there's Three Stooges in here, there's some weird sort of Gene Kelly dance in there at one point. It's kind of just its own thing, and it's unlike any other movie. So it's not for everybody. Most people cannot connect to this crazy slapstick stuff. They think it's just silly, especially when it's kind of scary at times, I guess, for some people.
Right. I mean, they're classics in their own right, and they've got a cult following. A lot of people like them, some don't. So they're definitely worth checking out. If you haven't seen either one of these films, and we hadn't just ruined it for you, which I don't think we really have. I think we've still tried to be a little bit vague, as far as the second one especially. But I really feel like that it is worth your time to watch these films. It's worth your time to examine them for yourself and see if you like them. If you don't, no harm, no foul. But it was an interesting experience, especially with the second one and all the visuals. Any last remarks as far as these films go? And because they're supposed to be horror films, right? And let's get to the, are they scary films? Do you feel like they're both, or either one of them, worth the title scary? Because I feel like at times the first one may be a little bit more, whereas the second one's more of just kind of like an acid trip or something. What do you think? Because that's, what we're kind of arguing here anyways. Are these scary films?
I see how they could be scary for some people, because it definitely is effective when it's trying to be. The music really creates that vibe. The sound effects, the way I was talking about the modulating the voices, the makeup effects, I think they're all really good and top notch. It's just the tone, and this is more of a comedy horror film, and that's the great thing about the horror genre, is there are different things in it. There's comedy. There is just straight up trying to freak you out, like The Shining or The Thing or something like that. And then there's some that are just kind of like, just killer clowns from outer space. They're just kind of whatever that is. So they're definitely all over the place, and I think that's what's kind of fascinating about these is they are very different, and they kind of show you that comedy and horror are not too far apart. They both elicit something, some sort of emotional reaction. And to me, if they're not doing either one of those things, if you're not scared or you're not laughing, then the film is a failure. But to me, this one works on both levels. Both of these films do anyway.
And I just want to say, for anybody that worships these films and favorite two movies, I don't want to come off as these are bad films. You shouldn't go watch them because that's not what our channel is about. I'm not here to bash anything. And there's parts I loved, there's parts I didn't so much. So if you love these films as you do specifically, then I applaud that because everybody's tastes are their own and everything's subjective. And when we say, is this a scary movie, we're just being funny because we're two guys that are like everybody else, and we have our preferences and stuff like that, but that doesn't mean we're the end all be all. So if you enjoy these films more than me, good job. I'm proud of you. That's awesome because I probably have films that you don't enjoy as much. So everybody gets hung up on that kind of stuff these days. Is if you don't like it, you're a bad fan. Hush. If you like the film, good. If not, whatever. But really did have a good time watching these films. I think, like I said, if you haven't given yourself a chance to watch these films, definitely worth checking out.
For the next episode of the SuperCaZt.
I am the only daddy you got. I am the damn paterfamilias.
Now Mama's got a new beau.
Vernon here's got a job. Vernon's got prospects. He's bona fide. What are you?
You can't marry him.
I can, I am, and I will.
This gentleman bothering you?
Well, you can't marry my wife.
To get back to his wife and kids, Ulysses Everett McGill will do anything.
Hey, any boy, Smitty's.
But he's about to get off on the wrong track.
We can get out of here.
Okay, I'm with you fellas.
For the next episode of the SuperCaZt.
But thank you guys so much for joining us. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do so and follow us on X. And we'll see you guys next time on the SuperCaZt.